Morning, Tom.
Morning, Lisa. Well, first of all, welcome everybody to our very first Insights Pod, which is our effort to put into an audio format the BMA Insights publication, which has been running for a few years now. Lisa, what are we going to be discussing this morning?
Well, we'll start off, we'll discuss the contents of Insights edition 11. Oh, it's edition 11. Heavens. So there's lots and lots of content in there. There's a slight difference in how it's presented in this edition. When we'll kick off with an economic barometer. So that's the sort of overarching look at what's happening within the sector and how the markets are affecting what we do. And then, as per normal, there's lots and lots of briefings in the publication. And we'll try to remember what it is that we wrote.
And it's split into three sections, isn't it, the publication? So we've got understanding and growing the market,
Yep.
Which is one of our big priorities as an organisation, helping the sector reduce its environmental impact. So we've got kind of sustainability-related briefings. And then the third piece of the jigsaw is about raising standards across the industry. So we've got some briefings in there around policy developments related to that world.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what happens in Europe will affect us. So, I mean, one of the briefings in that section is the Drinking Water Directive, which I'm sure a lot of our members are eagerly getting their heads around.
Yeah, but before we kick off, this isn't the first time we've done a podcast together, is it?
No, we're recreating history, Tom.
Yeah, so for 14 years, we think. So we did the Science Amiga podcast together with under the stewardship of James Morgan, who's still kicking about as the lead of Chatty Duck Creative.
Yes,
so shout out to James. But it's going to be odd doing this without your supervision.
Yeah, James, thank you. You started a whole revolution. So yeah, it's all down to James.
Yeah, we're going to have to remember how to do podcasts, though, aren't we?
I'm sure it'll come to us, Tom. It'll be fine. We'll be all right.
We've got our affiliates, Dissident, looking after us as well.
We love our Dissident Creative Agency. They're great.
Cool. Right, let's crack on, shall we?
Yeah.
So to kick off, we're going to do some rapid updates on BMA activity in each of our focus areas. So the first set of updates are on reducing environmental impact.
Yep, and this is going from October to December last year. So Tom, you wrote to a Labour MP, Chris Curtis. You were outlining the challenges of water efficiency retrofits and enabling new developments. This is given areas like Cambridge are also already seeing potential developments put on hold due to concerns around water resources.
On October the 15th, following an email to Gareth Snell and Adam Jogi, two local MPs to BMA, requesting their assistance on mandatory water efficiency labelling policy, those MPs submitted parliamentary questions on behalf of the BMA.
And then October 17th, BMA meets the Environment Agency and DEFRA to discuss the development of the mandatory water efficiency label and the utilisation of the unified water label.
On the 1st of November, the Windsor Castle Summit, organised by the BMA to discuss issues like water scarcity and antimicrobial resistance, concluded.
And then on November the 13th, Tom, again, out and about, attending the Water Efficiency and Energy Savings, Innovation and New Build Housing Roundtable. And that was hosted by House Builder and Developer magazine.
On the 3rd of December, we wrote a letter to DEFRA officials expressing both support for mandatory water labelling, but also our concerns with the current direction of the government's plan.
Yeah. On December 10th, we write to Lucy Powell MP, Leader of the House, calling for a parliamentary debate on water recycling, and to Baroness Hayman requesting a meeting to discuss how our expertise can contribute to policy making on water efficiency.
So that's our rapid updates for the reducing the environmental impact section. Obviously, members can get updates year round and right up to date through the Insights inbox bulletin, which you send out every other week.
Yes, that's right. And then looking at raising standards, this is what's happened from October to December last year, Tom.
So on October the 14th, I wrote to the Chief Inspector of the Drinking Water Inspectorate and the Director General for Water at DEFRA, outlining the association's concern with regards to divergence with the EU's recast Drinking Water Directive.
And then on October 16th, Tom, again, you attended a meeting with the National Merchant Buying Society Lightside Committee, and they discussed the bathroom sector's regulatory challenges.
On October the 24th, in response to a parliamentary question which was submitted with the support of BMA to the Secretary of State for DEFRA, that the Minister outlined an openness to accepting Drinking Water Directive compliant certification within the UK marketplace for products in contact with drinking water.
And then November 20th, the BMA responds to a European Commission feasibility study concerning the introduction of a EU common database or system of management for digital product passports for construction products.
On November 28th, I took to LinkedIn to provide an explainer video on compliance with Regulation 4 and address some common misconceptions. And that was widely shared and is open to all members to use in their own training.
Yep. On December 3rd, Andy McLean, BMA Technical Director, has produced a paper for NHS estates outlining wet testing issues and solutions for a collaborative approach to transition to higher standards.
And a busy month for Andy.
Yep.
On December the 9th, he was appointed to chair B504, which is the Standards Committee for Sanitary Tapware, and as the committee manager for the parent group.
And now when we turn to understanding and growing the market, again, this is what the BMA were up to from October to December last year.
So on October 14th, in emails to two Labour MPs, I detailed market surveillance challenges due to cuts in trading standards, and I requested further collaboration with them to protect compliant businesses and consumers from those rogue actors.
And then on the 1st of November, for KBB Focus, Tom, you wrote a piece that analysed the budget and the implications for bathroom manufacturers and the supply chain.
In November the 4th, the BMA set out what recent budget measures will mean for the bathroom sector in particular.
And then on November the 7th, in a feature for KBB Review, Tom, you warned that the US President-elect Trump's proposed economic policies could raise inflation in the country and extend high interest rates in Europe and beyond.
In December, on the 3rd, we wrote to Alex Norris, MP, to highlight the urgent need for national leadership in addressing the decline in public toilet facilities across the UK. Earlier, Alex had moved some amendments to the Levelling Up Bill in support of this particular issue. Now he's a minister. Let's see what he does.
Exciting times. And then on December the 10th, in a letter to James Murray MP, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, a BMA warns of the potential adverse effects of the government's proposal to remove business property relief from inheritance tax, something we touched on earlier.
And then we had a nice break for Christmas and have returned in the new year busier than ever.
Absolutely. So what do you want to do first, Tom? We're going to have a look at the economic section.
Yeah, so this is a barometer which has been put together by our very able colleague, Jane Blateborough, who's the BMA's research manager. And it just covers off various different indicators around both our individual sector's performance, the kind of state of the construction industry, and also some macroeconomic indicators as well. The best way for people to get this into their heads is to check out the Insights publication when it comes out, right? Yeah,
it is. It's a visual representation, and we're looking across all sorts of different data points. So, I mean, the data from the CPA is always really, really invaluable. We'll have data from Bank of England, RSM, Federation of Master Builders, BMBI, PHMI. The folks at our MRA research. So yes, it's just lots of data points all sort of put together to give this overall picture of what's happening, or certainly a rearview mirror view of what happened towards the end of last year and what that's going to mean going forward.
So what are the headlines then? So our member data, we collect turnover statistics from our members on a monthly basis. What's that telling us about that rear view mirror? What's happened over the last quarter?
We're currently waiting for our December stats for that one. So we'll have those ready in the Insights publication. What I'd like to say is, hold on, folks, it'll be in the publication.
But what the general kind of headlines is really subdued marketplace, isn't it? And it's a tough time for bathroom manufacturers.
Really, really, really tough. I mean, last year there's so many ups and downs. I think there was such a sense of optimism following the election, and that's kind of waned slightly with the policies that are coming down the line now. But I think looking forward, there's a general feeling that there is actually a sense of optimism out there, regardless of different policies, which we'll talk about later. The construction sector overall there is a sense of optimism with the government's planning and direction for house building and national infrastructure projects, all that sort of thing. So there's a certain amount of optimism, I think.
So we're looking in the RMI sector. So bathrooms are primarily driven by the refurbishment market, RMI, and that's looking at around a 4% increase in 2025, but from a very low base, right?
Yeah. And we're always looking at the spike from COVID, which really distorted all of the graphs. But yeah, it is from a low base. So, but it's looking positive. I think there is a good business sentiment. People are actually hopeful that we're turning a corner, and 2025 you'll start to see an increase.
So we're going to be covering off the budget in a little bit more detail later in the pod, aren't we? But there's so many unknowns around forecasting. I think if one thing the last 3 years has taught us is we can look at all of the indicators and try and make the best assumptions we can as individual businesses on what's going forward. But there's a lot of upside and downside risks out there. For me, and I've written about this in KBB Focus, the potential Trump tariffs, will he, won't he, has such a massive effect on the global economy in terms of the speed of international trade diversion, inflation, and what that then means in interest rates. So many very fundamental unknowns that really providing that barometer is just providing the best information available. Yeah. But it doesn't make forecasting easy for sure.
Absolutely not. And I don't think anybody would ever be able to give 100% forecast with confidence when there is a geopolitical risk coming down the line. By the time this podcast goes out, we may have the first indications of what Trump's about to do.
So that's the Barometer. Check it out on, if you're a BMA member, on the members area of the website. We will also be making hard copies available at the Insights Live event on February 19th at the Nottingham Belfry. It's free for members to attend, but you do have to register on our website. And if you're a bathroom manufacturer that's not a member, well, why not?
Exactly.
Get yourself joined.
Why not? We're a great bunch of people.
Okay, let's crack on.
Right. Okay. A little sip of coffee, thank you. So the biggest news for the association really towards the end of last year was your mammoth project, Tom. So this is where you're going to get to shine. So we want to talk about the Windsor Declaration. So this has been something that's an idea that's been in the pipeline for some time, really.
Yeah.
And there were certain factors that really propelled it forward and made the association decide, right, this is the time that we need to start to look at these issues.
Yeah.
So explain the Windsor Declaration.
Well, first of all, let me kind of explain the two issues that we were trying to address in the Windsor Summit, which was held on the 31st of October and the 1st of November at St George's House in Windsor Castle. So the two issues that we were really getting our teeth stuck into was, first Firstly, water scarcity. Now, that's perhaps not such a surprise that the bathroom industry should be looking at water scarcity, with about 60% of domestic water consumption in the UK, at least, taking place within the bathroom. Our products as an industry depend on a reliable source of water to be able to function. So it's both in our interests to try and address the water scarcity issue, and actually it is within our power to try and do something about it by helping to reduce domestic water consumption. So we are facing massive challenges globally around water scarcity, changing weather patterns, aging infrastructure in Western economies especially, is making water more difficult to manage and making it more difficult to serve our communities with a supply of fresh water. So we need to act. Additionally, in countries that are kind of catching up as economies, they similarly are facing challenges around water scarcity, whether that's because of the natural environment or because of climate change. So huge issue, something that really, as a sector, we knew we needed to address globally. Now, it's something that BMA obviously is heavily involved with in terms of discussion with government around different various aspects of a particular granular policy here in the UK. But we wanted to put an international lens on that particular issue. The second topic was antimicrobial resistance. Doesn't necessarily immediately spring to mind as an issue for the bathroom sector, but just let me explain kind of what that is. So AMR is basically the next pandemic, and it's already here. So these are resistant microbes that don't respond to antibiotics because of a combination of things like the overuse of antibiotics, both in healthcare and in the agricultural world and in the environment. The presence of antibiotics is leading to mutation of microbes that are becoming adapted to them and resistant to them. What's the consequence? Well, it potentially can completely unravel modern medicine as we know it, with huge consequences. And already many millions of people around the world are suffering and dying as a consequence of AMR infections. So what can we do as a bathroom sector about it? Why is this a relevance to us? Well, it's partly those water scarcity issues. You need water to be able to ensure hygiene, but also let's think back to the advent of the bathroom, right? And Dr. John Snow in London, and sanitation and access to water. Actually, it was great sanitation and the advent of proper kind of bathrooms and toilets that helped get us through that public health crisis. There's a big role for bathrooms in addressing this public health crisis. So we wanted to discuss that.
And in terms of what bathroom manufacturers can do with regards to AMR, what sort of products are out there that can help assist with all of that? Is it touchless taps, those sorts of things?
Yeah, well, there's already some products out there. In fact, we came up with it in the summit with this Windsor Declaration. Which was a statement by the people represented in the room. And they were some of the biggest bathroom companies in the world and the most senior people within those companies represented at the summit. So the declaration kind of sets out, this is what the bathroom industry can do. This is how we want to take things even further and improve the situation. So one of the things is we've got a working group established to try and assess what the current best practice is, and then monitor our improvement as an industry against that kind of benchmark. So there are already things you've said. Touch the taps, absolutely spot on. But also, in those countries with perhaps less developed sanitation provision, there's great products like the Sato toilet, which can really take sanitation out into those often remote communities, which is fabulous. So there's products that already exist to improve sanitation and hygiene, no matter what the setting. But we need to promote those, but also be constantly innovating and taking things further.
Yeah.
And same can be said for water scarcity, and that ambition to get a ever more water efficient home through innovation of product.
Yeah, and we have quite a few people who've already signed up to the declaration, don't we? But really, it's about time that the rest of our members signed up.
So there's 22 signatories at the moment, which includes many of the biggest bathroom manufacturers. So the Lixil Group, Hans Grohe, Ideal Standard, Rocker Group. Big names have already signed up to it. There's also supporting organisations like ICC and IAPMO, and a shout out to Dom Sims, the outgoing CEO of ICC, who made a really amazing commitment at the summit to put the finance behind actually driving this declaration forward. And also partner organisations like the BMA in other markets, so particularly PMI and NKBA, who are United States-based trade bodies that have really come in behind the declaration and are also supporting it. And we are now looking for further signatories. So we've had a few companies agree that they're going to be signing up already, and we hope to kind of give some prominence to those companies that are signing up and committing to the declaration in the wake of the summit itself.
Yeah. What sort of steps are we looking at this year? Are there any sort of major milestones that we're going to try and hit with this?
Yeah, the first milestone is a meeting and an event at KBIS, which is the big trade show in late February in Las Vegas. So we're going to be talking to a wider group of manufacturers and encouraging them to sign up to the declaration there, alongside a panel with Bill Darcy, who's the CEO of NKBA, and a few other guests. So that's the first big milestone. We'll be kind of walking the floor at ISH, which is happening again in March in Frankfurt, to again encourage other manufacturers to get on board and different stakeholders to consider what their role could be in this. And it's really about establishing those working groups coming out of the declaration to kind of drive awareness of the issues through publicity activity, and do that benchmarking and monitoring piece to make sure that the association is moving forward in the way that was intended by the declaration.
It's exciting times. We just need a few more signatures and a bit more promotion.
This is just the start.
Yeah.
This is going to be something that we as an association are really committed to, and all of the signatories are really committed to. So it's going to be a formidable piece of work that has the potential to make a real difference to people around the world. Yeah. So very exciting and a little scary.
Yes, it's groundbreaking to be able to get all of these huge companies together with a common aim. We should see great things this year. So do you want to move on then?
Yeah, let's move on. And I'm going to start picking your brains now, Lisa, on something which I know you've been immersed in. It's a couple of updates. First of all, on the government's approach to transforming the water sector. So this is a bill that has just become something which Parliament is considering, called the Water Special Measures Bill. Tell us about the bill and what's being proposed.
So this is the government's aim, really, to drive the improvements in the water industry that we're all looking for. So it's looking at things like underinvestment in infrastructure, levels of pollution, the illegal sewage spills. I mean, if there was one topic that dominated a great deal of last year and for many years now has been sewage in our waterways, it's a passion the British public now to get this sorted. So the government is on board with this. So it's a whole raft of measures really that they're trying to introduce to bring some improvements to the overall picture. I mean, there hasn't been a reservoir built for, heaven knows, 30 years.
Yeah, casting some water not so far from here.
Yeah. There's a real issue, and as you go back to the water scarcity issue, you know, there are places in the southeast that are really struggling right now with water supply. So this is all about bringing improvements, but it's also about tackling the water companies themselves. Excessive bonuses when the sewage has been pumped into our rivers, and part of the government aim in this is to potentially bring criminal charges against these water companies that are blatantly pumping sewage into the waterways, but paying enormous bonuses. So how are they going to do that? And one of they're giving Ofwat greater regulatory powers, but there's also a question around if Ofwat have actually got the teeth to be able to do this. And there's some suggestion that maybe there will be a new regulator, a revamped regulator to put all this forward. But there are sort of bigger questions as well as to how are water companies going to be fined? You know, is it going to be, sorry for the pun, but a drop in the ocean for water companies? But I think if the government get this right and the public can actually see that they've taken this policy by the teeth and are making strides, I think we might start to see the Labour Party gaining back a little bit of popularity, because I think that's been lost recently.
But not everyone's happy with what's been proposed, are they? So I know the subheading that we've got in our briefing is more holes than Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So yes, I must admit that looking at this bill and then seeing it being debated in the House of Commons and the House of Lords rather, and the House of Lords is a great place to pick apart all these bills that are coming through. I mean, heavens, Labour have been very busy since they came into power. A raft of different policies. And so where these things are getting picked apart is through the in the House of Lords. The bill's broadly welcomed, but it's still not being hailed as the most robust piece of policy that could be brought in. The regulatory effectiveness of Ofwat is under scrutiny. How are bonuses going to be banned too? Nobody quite knows how that's going to work, which is why we're saying it's more holes than Swiss cheese. The effectiveness of Ofwat, and one of the things that the bill doesn't address at all, and it will not address, is whether the water industry should go back into public ownership. Mm-hmm. I'm not the expert on this, but I think there's a public argument for it. Mm-hmm. And then there's another argument that says, well, it's just too expensive. There are so many water companies now in financial distress. How much are the public willing to take in terms of it costing them? Because it will,
yeah,
you know, people who are in charge of the water companies, they have a duty to their shareholders. The shareholders need their return. But the public also need to see that the water industry is providing a service that they're being well paid for. Yeah.
If members are really interested in this topic, I'd really recommend checking out Professor Dieter Helm's writing on it, because he just really picks apart and kind of addresses all of these issues in really, really great detail. So if you just Google him, he's got a great website with lots of papers, and it's well worth the time. But I suppose the key question, Lisa, for our audience here on the pod is, what does all this mean for the bathroom industry?
Immediately, I don't see an immediate effect, but there certainly will be something coming down the line. And this is where it's really great to see bills progressing through the House of Commons and the House of Parliament, because I don't know, I'm too geeky, but I find that bit real. That's the bit of the bill and policy progress that I find the most interesting. So the Baroness Hayman of Alcock, who's part of the parliamentary process, she's been examining the bill. One thing that she said, and I do need to quote, Baroness Hayman is the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for DEFRA. So she said that it's completely bonkers that in this country we use drinking water to flush our toilets. And she's absolutely right. So she confirmed there's a consultation on revising regulations that'll be published this year, and that's about examining water reuse. And it's all part of the how we improve our waterways. How do we save water? And so this idea of using wholesome water to flush the toilets could actually finally be looked at again. Now, this may have an impact with the recirculating showers idea too. If we can find a way where we don't need to use wholesome water for every activity within the bathroom, then we should start then being able to look at how we can actually save water in this country.
Yeah, so nothing really on the face of the bill, but some opportunities to come in the aftermath.
Yeah. I think this year will be an interesting. It'll be interesting to watch to see exactly what kind of regulations the government is actually willing to look at again.
So, Water Special Measures Bill is a DEFRA bill. Sticking with DEFRA, another one of their big policies is extended producer responsibility for packaging. And you've spent an awful lot of time on this. So, I'm going to ask you to kind of give it an explanation in the top lines, because this really is relevant to members right now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So, the principle behind the regulations, which is packaging extended producer responsibility, is that they're adopting a polluter pays principle, which I don't think anyone should really argue with. It's aiming to increase household waste recycling, and that's making businesses responsible for their total net cost of managing the waste, and they'll be paying the local authorities to actually manage that waste at the curbside. So it's really quite complicated. And the Waste and Resources team at DEFRA have been working really, really closely with businesses, with all stakeholders, trade associations, for well over a year now, in introducing this policy and going through the various stages of it being introduced. There's quite a reliance on business to be able to track their waste. It has to be tracked. It's quite a big ask. But then, businesses should also be looking at agencies that can help them, who are waste experts, to be able to do this thing. So there are different onuses on the size of your business. Depending on the size of your business will depend how much you need to report about your packaging waste. Read the briefing. It's sort of complicated, but we've tried to break it down into simple chunks, and then for people to go off and look at the areas that affect them the most. So if we could sit here, I think, for 3 or 4 hours going through this piece of policy, but people will get bored. One of the interesting parts about this policy is that DEFRA have stated, and this is relevant to bathroom manufacturers, because a lot of our manufacturers trade through merchants and retailers, is that their primary packaging that goes to merchants, they've suggested that this is the sort of packaging that will end up in household waste bins. And we are arguing that that's simply not the case. Now, I suppose we need to do a shout out to CPA, because we've been working closely with CPA.
That's the Construction Products Association.
Yeah, and there are lots of other trade associations involved in this as well, where we're saying, well, look, construction waste in an overall sense does not end up in household wheelie bins. It is, if you buy a bathroom suite and there's lots and lots of packaging, you will have a tradesperson to come in and fit that, and it's the tradesperson's responsibility to get rid of the rubbish. It wouldn't end up in the household bin, and this is the sort of general argument. And DEFRA are appearing to be willing to find a workaround to this, which is really encouraging. And the CPA and various other trade bodies, we're all working together to try and find some legal definition that can be put into the bill that will, in some part, address how construction waste packaging is then disposed of, and it shouldn't come under the scope of the EPR fees.
Yeah. So that's what we and the CPA are doing. What action do bathroom manufacturers and indeed other players in the supply chain, like retailers, what do they need to be doing now?
They need to be tracking their waste. Because it's quite complicated, a lot of it depends, I think, on the size of the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you dispose of something under like 25 tonnes, there are different obligations towards the size of the company and to how much waste you actually use or that could potentially be out there in various streams. So you need to go to the DEFRA website. There's so much information on our website. I mean, I attend all the DEFRA waste and resources meetings. There are regular updates. There are new base fees that have been announced. But for bathroom manufacturers, once you've sort of got a head around where you actually stand in the scope of fees, the biggest aim of all this is use better packaging. If you've got more sustainable packaging, you will pay less. If you're using lots of glass and expensive packaging, you'll pay more. So
that's the bottom line, isn't it?
It really is, and the producer-based principle is working here. If you can ensure that all your packaging is limited, it's recyclable, then the fees that you pay should be less.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth stating at the moment that the PRNs and PERNs, if I have that right, I think producers are still paying those up until a certain point. I'd like to say January 2026, but I could be completely wrong there.
I was quite staggered by the increase in financial burden for businesses that this EPR will bring about. So, that it's going from £140 million per year financial burden on businesses to 1.7 billion.
Yeah,
which is crazy. It's such a massive increase, and just underpins that you got to act now, right?
You really do have to act now. I mean, as I say, the work that we're doing with the CPA to try and find a workaround with construction product waste, and it's a sensible plan, and DEFRA seem to be willing to work with us on that, and that may help some of our sector if it is that we can be sure that construction waste then isn't in the household.
But don't pin your hopes on it. Is what we're saying to members.
Absolutely, yeah. Make sure that you're reducing your packaging. Make sure it's easily recyclable, I think, is the key, and then the cost will come down. But be aware that the cost may well be quite extensive, at least in the first year, until the policy's bedded in.
Thanks, Lisa.
Right then. What shall we look at next? We're still on our reducing environmental impact section, aren't we? Yeah.
So I think the next thing that we're going to be discussing is the evolving Drinking Water Directive, right?
Absolutely. Now this, hasn't the Drinking Water Directive been going on forever and a day?
This feels like something which has been kind of bubbling along in the background at the BMA and part of our work alongside European associations for decades. So just to kind of underpin really why we're interested in what is an update of an EU regulation. Obviously, most bathroom manufacturers operate in both the EU and the UK marketplace. So there is something that we continue to have to look at, even though there might not be direct applicability in the UK straight away. But this is something that we need to be paying attention to. The reason that the Drinking Water Directive has recast, it's all about protecting the water supply and the water supply to consumers the drinking water quality of it, making sure it's not contaminated, and that it is continues to be wholesome in all the different markets around Europe. Up until till now, each country within the European Union has kind of set its own standards, its own way of ensuring that drinking water it is safe, and that the materials in contact with drinking water are safe for consumers. What the recast directive aims to do is basically have one set of rules for Europe, and that is it's quite a complicated process. I'd say we've got a webinar, especially on this, which is on the members area of the website. Rather than us kind of failing to do justice in it, I'd say
absolutely
check that webinar out, because it really is comprehensive and gives a much better understanding. And it'll check out the briefing in Insights as well.
I mean, we couldn't go through all the implementing acts, implementing decisions. I think people would switch off pretty quickly. But it's a huge piece of work, and more than likely, bathroom manufacturers here will need to know about the recast directive. But yeah.
And just kind of briefly touching on what it means for trading in the UK, there was some discussion around Scotland, because the Scottish government had said that they planned to implement the DWD, even because water is a devolved matter. So it was within their right to do a cut and paste job from the European Union. We've actually been in touch with the Scottish government and discussed this with them. And just for bathroom manufacturers' assurances, one thing that they've said is that the elements around testing of materials in contact with drinking water, they will align with the rest of the UK as they have to under the Internal Market Act. So that is rest assured that we're not going to be having different rules for different nations within the UK. That is something to be reassured by.
Yeah.
At present, the Drinking Water Inspectorate, the DWI, seem to be suggesting that we're going to kind of stick with the rule set that we have already for materials in contact with drinking water in the UK, which is our colleague Andy can always reel off the standards numbers very easily, but I'm less capable. But there's a British standard for materials testing, which will continue to apply in the UK. And we're having some really positive discussions with policymakers around, if you're trading in both markets, will compliance with the DWD be adequate for the UK market as well, so that you basically got the option of going the two routes. And that's a really fruitful and welcome conversation to be having. Yeah. We're moving on now then to the raising standards section. So tell us, first of all, about the strengthening building safety post-Grenfell. Grenfell's obviously a terrible tragedy that was now 8 years ago. But the inquiry is now reported. And we're kind of moving on to a new phase of response to those awful events. Tell us a little bit about what's happened.
Okay. So Dame Judith Hackett's report in 2018, Building a Safer Future, I mean, it exposed so many failings within the construction sector. And so she made various recommendations, and one of which was to create this sort of golden thread of information. So a lot of the briefing that we've actually put into the Insights edition this time is looking at the proposals that she made in that, and the importance of the golden thread of information. So I'd like to actually use a well-quoted quote about what the golden thread of information is. So I'll read that out. So the golden thread is the information that allows you to understand a building and the steps needed to keep both the building and people safe now and in the future. And really what the golden thread is, partly, is to ensure that every piece of information about the building, the products within there, are all sort of kept in a digital repository of some sort. So what I'm trying to say is that the importance for manufacturers, particularly bathroom manufacturers, of keeping a digital record, keeping their product data in a digitised format is absolutely crucial. And whilst it might not seem that relevant within Dame Judith Hackett's report, we still need to ensure that a bath has, can resist a fire. It might not be immediately obvious, but bathroom products have to have the same sorts of safety measures with any other construction product. So the Grenfell Tower, the final inquiry phase report, that also had numerous recommendations, which we would expect that the government do adopt. There were 3 in particular that seemed relevant for our sector. And all of these recommendations are looking at construction, design, regulation, testing, all of those areas. So there were 3 main recommendations that feel particularly relevant to the bathroom sector. And that was on construction product testing and certification. The report was recommending that the construction regulator is responsible for assessing.
This is a new regulator, right?
Yes, for assessing the conformity of construction products with legislative requirements. I can never say that word. But it criticised UCAS, who is the body for assessing certification and testing, for limited oversight. And I don't think that's
among others. It was critical of quite a few bodies, wasn't it?
Yeah. There was that whole criticism of a race to the bottom, which was right, and those failings are quite rightly exposed. Another recommendation are around the certificates issued by the construction regulator that say copies of all the test results supporting that certificate should be there. And this also it looks at that golden thread of information. So a product, the digital information contained there should have all the testing, all the certification, almost like a declaration of conformity, really, I guess. And manufacturers have to provide the regulator with the full testing history of the certified products. I think within Grenfell there was the argument that many manufacturers, cladding manufacturers, were going to various test houses to make sure that their product was approved, and it wasn't really the best approach. It seemed sort of fairly underhand. It's saying that manufacturers should be legally required to provide all test results that support claims about the fire performance of products. So that will, affect bathroom manufacturers too. And one of the other recommendations, the third recommendation, was that the construction regulator should sponsor the development of a library. And that provides the resource for those who design buildings, particularly the higher risk buildings. And that's to have access to clear products information and product performance linked to all the reports. So again, we're in that situation where there's a great piece of legislation, and think how the policy has moved on, but it's still not providing the answers that we're actually seeking.
So we've got two kind of elements to this, haven't we? We've got the how things have developed post Judith Hackett report, and the policy work that MHCLG has been doing in the background, and the industry's response as well, which has been the establishment of the Code for Construction Products Information, which I'm going to ask you a little bit about in a moment. And then separately from that, we've got Martin Moore-Bick's inquiry report, which really raises the bar even further. But we don't know what the government's going to do about that yet.
No, there's no immediate answers. The questions is, can a new regulator actually be more effective than a regulator that we have now? What will actually change to make that happen? Can they effectively oversee all the testing, the certification, maintain a library of centralised product test data? Who's going to pay for that? And a question arose when I was looking into all this. When I'd also looked at the EU digital product passport in a previous briefing. And it seems that if we adopted that, it would solve a lot of the issues that are currently going on here. So will that happen? Well, I don't know. Greater minds than I will be deciding that. But there should be a progress. I think it's due in March this year, because the Deputy PM, Angela Rain, has also asked for a whole review of building regulations as well. So I think we're supposed to hear something March 2025.
So almost certainly a topic for conversation on the next pod and in the next edition of Insights.
Yeah.
So what should manufacturers do?
The manufacturers need to ensure that they are adopting this golden thread of information. It's to ensure that your product data is held in one place, so that's all the testing certification for each product, and it basically it needs to be in a digital format. So the construction code for product information, we did a bit of a
CCPI for short.
CCPI, love the acronyms. Yeah. Their system actually takes people through. If you sign up to CCPI, this will actually solve your issue of having the digital product data, because their system of how you get the certificate looks at all of the testing, it even looks at the company as well to make sure that their processes are in place. It's an overarching scheme. There is a cost, but it means that anybody looking at your product, if you have CCPI certification, then specifiers, whoever, will know then that you've actually gone through this process and all of your product data is effectively certified.
Yeah. So it's not part of the license to operate right now, but we think it could be.
Yeah, and I think if it is that you're seen to be part of the CCPI, then it's almost it's a guaranteed stamp on your product, so it'll be beneficial.
Yeah,
but there is a cost.
Yeah, I mean, I remember actually one of the first things that we commenced when I started at the BMA was an audit of members' construction product information, so declarations of performance and the testing criteria to back up those declarations. And I'm sorry to say that it is an area of weakness, I think, for the sector, but it's something that we should always have been doing. And what Grenfell does, starting with those safety critical products, but reaching all parts of the construction supply chain, makes us all up our game. Yeah. So it is something that everyone really within the bathroom industry should be looking at.
Yeah, it's not just a business requirement. There's a moral requirement here. Yeah. Nobody ever wants that to be repeated again. So yes. So shall we move on? Discuss one of our other briefings in here. So we're looking at the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill.
Snappily titled.
It is a snappily titled one. Now, I don't think we'll really be looking at the metrology bit of the bill. I don't think anyone here is really interested in the weights and measures. But it's another interesting bill from the government.
Yeah, and it fits very much with what we've just been discussing, doesn't it, in terms of product safety?
Yeah.
So the origins of this is the UK's exit from the European Union. So back in the last Parliament, there was an Act of Parliament around EU withdrawal, which kind of retained various different aspects of EU legislation and then took a bonfire to other aspects of EU regulation. This left a gulf. The Office for Product Safety and Standards, OPSS, conducted a product safety review. And really that's what's informed the creation of this bill in the new Parliament, and what's going through now. Attempts to address some of those gaps by giving the Secretary State some powers to kind of join the dots and fill in the gaps, whatever metaphor that you want to use, to make sure that we have the product regulation in place that we need to continue to operate as an economy in a safe way. Yeah.
And there's, again, this is, I'll go back to my geeky bit about this. This is where it's so interesting to see these sort of bills go through the Houses of Parliament, House of Lords, the House of Lords. I want to be in there.
Yeah, it's got a pretty geeky title for a bill, but it's pretty sweeping and it's a big important bill, isn't it? Because it enables the Secretary of State to pass secondary legislation, which is that's the real kind of nuts and bolts of what we all have to comply with as operators in the economy.
Yeah, which sort of powers will he? There's a bit of crossover because construction product regulations, I need to make sure I get this right. So isn't that under Department for Business and Trade? The bill actually falls under the Department for Business and Trade, but the construction product legislation is MHCLG.
Angela Rayner's department, we'll call it.
We'll call it Angela's department. Oh, and OPSS, really. So is the Secretary of State now going to look at the product regulations? How is all that going to work? What is he going to look at? Is he going to pick and choose? And this is all around divergence again from EU rules, which affects business. We need a little bit more consistency probably with EU law.
And this bill kind of makes that possible, doesn't it? At the discretion of the Secretary of State.
It's a possibility. It's a glimmer of hope a bit further down the line. Whether it will happen, who knows? But when the bill was progressing through the House of Lords, again, they pick these bills apart. And it's great. It's good watching. I recommend it to anybody. But they've added a clause, actually, that I'll make sure I do this right, that intends to probe whether the Secretary of State will use powers under Sections 1 and 2 to regulate products used in construction. So these powers could enact regulations to mitigate product risk, set out requirements indicating coverage of product safety rules. And if that's the case, then government will be keeping pace with EU product safety regulations. And it's only going to be a good thing for business. If we can mirror EU construction product regulations, it's less onerous for businesses operating in both markets.
So this bill, it's not going to catch many headlines. You're not going to hear about it on News of 10.
And it should do.
But it is something that we're paying really close attention to, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, alignment with EU laws, it makes life easier for UK businesses. And we just wait to see really what's going to be involved in there.
So if it makes its way through Parliament and becomes an act of Parliament, we've still got to keep a watching brief, haven't we? Because it all depends on the action of the different Secretaries of State in terms of how they take forward what they're enabled to do under the bill. Under the Act, sorry.
Well, under the Act. So let's just hope they're having a good day and it goes all in our favour, is really all we can say. It needs to be made clear, actually, what sort of standards, product regulations that are going to be looked at. We just don't know.
Well, we're going to plough on now with understanding and growing the market.
Yeah, and this is part of, one of the three aims of the association. So we'll look at everything that will help us to grow as a sector. So one of the biggest bits of news last year was the budget.
Yes.
Quite big impacts.
Yeah, I mean, the economy really was kind of stalling ahead of the budget in anticipation of it, and unfortunately hasn't massively picked up since the budget. But let's kind of get into what was included and go into it in a bit more detail. So this was the first budget delivered by a female Chancellor, as Rachel Reeves was very keen to impress upon the media around the date of the event. It was also trailed by lots of messaging from the Treasury around the so-called black hole in public finances. So this was unfinanced spends within departments across government and accusations that the previous Conservative administration had concealed that gap in funding. This was kind of used as a rationale for a fiscal policy which includes some tax rises and also, in inverted commas, difficult decisions on spending, such as the already trailed removal of winter fuel allowance for pensioners and various other different things. But there was some big spending in there as well. It wasn't all about cuts, and some of those spending were on kind of major infrastructure projects like the extension of HS2 into Euston, and a commitment to kind of drive some additional house building in particularly the social housing sector as well. So it was a very definite kind of tale of two halves, really, the budget. We were initially resisted the temptation, which a lot of other industry groups seemed to kind of leap on, which was being very, very critical of the budget. I think people were almost had a kind of gut reaction to it, and we were initially quite positive and looked at the opportunities that exist for the bathroom sector within the budget, but the devil is in the detail, and one of the things that has caused real big concern among a particular subset of our members, I think it's fair to say, and also a subset of the merchanting sector, is the implications for family-owned businesses of kind of small and medium size, and that's the removal of business property relief. Now, this is a tax relief from inheritance tax, which has existed from the mid-70s up to now, and it basically gives 100% relief on business property to heirs who receive that business property. Reason being, they are not liquid assets, and the relief is intended to ensure that those businesses remain in private ownership in communities. It's got a long history, as I say. It was introduced by the Labour Party in the 70s, initially as a 50% relief, and then was increased in the late 80s, early 90s to 100% relief. So it's got a long history, well established. I think it's probably one of those things alongside agricultural property relief, which has been on Treasury civil servants' kind of to-do list that they'd liked to have done for a long time, and because of the political implications of it, it's probably been rebuffed by Chancellor after Chancellor. But it seems that Rachel Reeves has said, but things are so tight now, this is something that we must look at. I think it's got some unintended consequences which could be really detrimental for the UK economy, and indeed detrimental for some of BMA's members. So we've been in contact with the Treasury on this. So far, haven't really received a satisfactory response from them, but we'll continue in partnership with other organisations. I know that the Builders Merchants Federation, who have a greater number of members that are affected by this, are being very vociferous, and we'll support them in that as well. But that is a big problem. But it's not all doom and gloom. There were some rays of light in the budget, and unfortunately that's being lost in the narrative at the moment because of things like agricultural property relief and business property relief, and the adverse effects that's having on particular categories of business.
But then there are also the national insurance.
We can't forget national insurance. This is part of a package of things which is making hiring a bit more difficult. And we're going to get on to the new deal for working people shortly, which is probably going to make people think twice about hiring. NI is just another part of this. So this increases employer NI by 1.25%. And just makes hiring people more expensive. For micro businesses, there is an increase in the allowance, the employer allowance, which means that for businesses with a very low turnover, below $1 million, it probably won't have much of an effect. But for pretty much every other company, it's going to make the cost of staffing your business more difficult, more expensive. There is a good rationale that's hard to swallow on this, in that the theory is if labour becomes more expensive, then it's going to drive productivity improvements in the economy, and the UK has historically had really, really poor productivity for the last 15, 20 years. So it could have some, I'm sure, intended consequences of improving productivity. But that's really hard to swallow if you want to grow your business and you need people to do it right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge with NI.
Yeah.
That was the major tax rise that was in the budget, and the one that is probably most vexing for the most companies.
Yeah. It's tough times for business out there. Do you want to have a look at the UK's industrial strategy then? And this is sort of like a key for growth.
This
really,
is Johnny Reynolds, who is the business secretary.
No relation.
No relation, I assure you. Who is this is his baby, isn't it? But tell us about the industrial strategy and what's contained within.
Well, I think a new industrial strategy has been long overdue. I think most quarters would agree with that. The challenges around the global economy are huge. It's not a UK thing. Every country is looking at this. We need proactive strategies for international competition. The Trump administration coming in we don't know what it would be. There's the potential for this trade tariff war. And we know that we need sustainable growth. So the Labour government have brought in the Invest 2035, the UK's modern industrial strategy green paper. It's actually been launched almost as a consultation document. And what they want to do is look at, it's central to the government's growth agenda. But it also has some policies in there around the net zero transition. Great British Energy, the Labour Party are very up on the green energy. So it's received a huge amount of responses from various organisations, including the BMA. And it's focusing on, I think it's 8 overall sectors, about looking at advanced manufacturing, clean energy, creative industries. And it's looking at the importance of skills, infrastructure, innovation, but it's also slightly touching on the regulatory environment and international trade, attracting global finance as well. Rachel Reeves currently she's just come back from China. Attracting global investment is a key priority. But the strategy that's contained within the UK industrial strategy addresses some of the other crucial challenges. Part of it looks at empowering local leaders, addressing infrastructure needs as well. The issue, I think, because it appears a high-tech approach, is that there may be a concern that it's not going to affect our sector as much. But SMEs need to be included; they're vital to the economy. I mean, I think for bathroom manufacturing that there needs to be more support for SMEs. We'd like to see enhanced trade agreements. You'll be heading off to KBIS in a couple of weeks. And we almost sometimes feel that our sector's slightly at a disadvantage sometimes in terms of promotion.
Well, I think just in general, what my problem with the industrial strategy, and it's good that we are having a conversation nationally about industrial strategy now. It's the last time we had an industrial strategy as a country was in Theresa May's government. Yeah. So a long time where this hasn't been on the government agenda at all. So it's welcome that it's being discussed. But my problem with the Green Paper as it's been published at the moment is again, it goes straight towards rather than cross-cutting things that can help all sectors, including perhaps the less sexy sectors that collectively make up a huge and probably the majority of the economy. It goes straight to picking winners, like this massive concentration on AI, and the Industrial Strategy Board is being chaired by a chief executive of Microsoft in the UK. So it's very much about the sexy sectors, picking winners, and almost a lack of interest in the perhaps slightly more ugly industries that are tucked away on housing, on industrial estates in communities around the country, which collectively are so important for driving local economies. They're so important for driving the economy as a whole. And whereas other countries, most notably Germany, have historically concentrated on the Mittelstand, the medium-sized enterprises, seems that still UK government is obsessed by big businesses. But that's not where growth lies. Growth lies in the long tail of those medium-sized enterprises, like the ones in BMA membership. And I see very little in this industrial strategy to support businesses like those in our membership.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ISAC Council, it's a good idea to include as part of this, an advisory council. But yeah, I think there's a chance that important sectors are going to be lost in noise of AI.
And I get that every sector can't be represented and can't kind of be, they can't cite how they're going to support every single sector. Otherwise, the document would run to, 200,000 pages. But an effort to look at cross-cutting issues that can make a positive impact on everybody would be more welcome. And I'd love to see the trade association community, which represents such diverse parts of the British economy. I'd love to see them, perhaps through the Trade Association Forum, represented around the table in the Industrial Strategy Steering Committee, because it is a great way for them to get information from the real drivers of the economy.
Yeah, agreed. Shall we look at another bill then, the New Deal for Working People? So this is all about the employment rights bill. Huge.
Yeah, really big. And in the context of what we were just discussing on the budget and the NI increases, this is a further big cost to business, which is perhaps going to make companies think twice about hiring.
Yeah.
I mean, there over a series of years, there's been some rolling back of employment rights, thinking in the public sector, particularly around minimum service levels, which would prevent public sector employees from taking industrial action, and several other kind of things that have rolled back employment rights a little. This is an attempt to address that, and some would argue is maybe an overcorrection. I suppose the big headline in here is full employment rights from day one.
Yeah.
That means that you need to be even more certain that you're hiring the right person for the role that you have, because you're going to be paying redundancy from day one if you do need to make that role redundant. So you need to be a bit more sure that it's going to work.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's going to stop people from taking hiring risks, Lisa?
I think that there are such pressures on business right now, with national insurance contributions, employer national insurance contributions as well, with the extra measures taken in the employment rights bill. I think you can understand perfectly how businesses will be quite nervous and how they will approach any hiring. There are huge costs for business. I think maybe what it should make businesses realise is the value of the people that they currently have working with them, and to really look after the talent that they have.
By the way, going out and visiting many member sites, as I do, something which is really, really common among bathroom manufacturers is people that have worked in the businesses in our sector for decades, and in several cases, multiple generations of the family work in the business. So, that sort of longevity of service is something that we're very fortunate with within the bathroom industry. But it's, again, the challenge is getting new talent into organisations at every level and keeping that new talent. And I think that the measures in this bill have been brought forward with all the right intentions.
Yeah.
Actually, but it's going to have its implications for business without a doubt.
Absolutely. And there are so many. There's so much contained within the employment rights bill, and what we won't actually see perhaps any difference for 2 years to give businesses a chance to start to implement. But the sooner the better. HR departments will be super busy. They really do need to ensure that their HR processes are all in order to compensate with some of the new measures that are being brought in. I think largely that a lot of the measures are great for employment rights, but HR departments have to ensure that they've got effective policies in place. And I think overarching priority should be, this is the time to nurture talent. It's to look after the people that you have within the business.
I think again, similar to the NI discussion, similar to the increase in national living wage as well, which has gone up 6.7% in the budget that's just passed. All these things should lead to productivity gains, both for businesses and the economy at large. But whether or not that actually is the lived truth, we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. As this has sort of progressed through Parliament, the government's own impact assessment report said that the reforms are going to cost businesses up to £4.5 billion a year. It's not small. It's not small change. But then again, the Regulatory Policy Committee gave that impact assessment a red rating, saying that it wasn't even fit for purpose. So I think, the trade unions that are hailing it as great reform, but the employment costs, proposed legislation, it could affect job creation. We wait to see.
Yeah. So the key kind of measures, as I said, full employment rights from day one, ending 0-hour contracts, and ending the practice of so-called fire and rehire. Yeah. I don't think any of those practices are particularly prevalent in the bathroom industry from my conversations with members, but they are things that, as you say, your HR teams need to be cognizant of. I'm sure they all receive updates from your legal support. We're also going to be covering this off at Insights Live, and it as the full briefing with all the details of what's in that new deal for working people is included within the Insights publication coming out very shortly.
Yeah. We'll keep our eye on it. We'll make sure that anything that does come to fruition, we let members know about. I'm sure we'll do a webinar.
Well, Lisa, that is our very first Insights Pod. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, Virgin Insights Pod. It's great.
It's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been real good fun. We don't often get a chance to just sit and have a chat, do we, about what's in the publication.
And 14 years on from our last podcast, we've still got it, I think.
Oh, yes.
Let's see what the listeners think. Thanks very much.
And
see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.